All right, good morning. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, but let's bring in our Facebook groups here. So we must let it open up. That's what we say in the morning, I guess. Let's let it breathe for just a moment as we bring in our 3 Facebook groups because, we want to make sure they get an alert before I start getting texts that, hey, we didn't get an alert this morning. Yeah, you didn't. You didn't get an alert yet. We're late. And welcome in, everybody. This is Broncos for Breakfast. I am your host, Scott Kennedy, and well, I'm by myself so far today. That's one of the reasons we're late. I expect Nick to be running in here looking all frazzled and late and saying, I overslept any minute now. That's one of the problems about trying to do this at 6:30 in the morning. God bless him that he's able to do it as often as he is. And I'm surprised, in the 2 years that we've been doing this, he's only been late once or twice. First time I was actually worried about him. So, but, I've been listening to some Five Finger Death Punch. I'm good and caffeinated. And as Emish said in Braveheart, we didn't get dressed up for nothing. So here we are. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, on Mile High Huddle, doing. We want to talk some Denver Broncos coaching search, some of the latest rumors. Kind of want to have the airing of grievances too. The chat I noticed on live, for those of you listening after we do this live for the chat, we do this live for the interaction and everything, and it was getting a little ugly last night. I think there's a compelling reason against every candidate, every single one of them. Try not to latch on to those, try and focus on the positives because there's positives about all these candidates or else they wouldn't be candidates. So we want to try and focus on the positives and make an argument as we'll go through the chat here. One of the other things I wanted to talk about today too, the ESPN had a couple of staff writers put together the production rankings. I don't know how they rank the production on here of the rookie classes across the NFL. Frankly, I was a little surprised at where the Denver Broncos came in. So we will touch on that one just a little bit as well. Good surprise, bad surprise. I think I know where, if I asked, hey, give me a guess out of 32 teams where the Denver Broncos were, I think most of y'all would shoot pretty low. So we will see how that goes. But want to say good morning to some folks in the chat this morning. Stick them with us. Ethan, first one. I get a text from Ethan in the morning. Hey, where are you guys? We're going on. I appreciate you poking us a little bit, making sure that we're going. He says, good afternoon, gents or gent. Could be both by the time we get out of here today, Ethan. And Broncos country. And good morning to you as well. Jeremy says, morning, boys. I wasn't sure we were going to do it today. Yeah, I wasn't so sure either. But I was like, you know what? We've got plenty to talk about. I usually like to have a little notice if I'm going to go solo, but the chat helps me out and there's enough going on. And like I said, we can work off the chat and talk about pros, cons, mostly pros. Like I said, I want to get into the pros. I want to keep this positive. What are the good reasons to have each and every one of these candidates have? Because yesterday it focused too much. Last night it was focusing too much on the negatives. We can focus on the negatives. It's not going to get you anywhere. I want you to support whoever you bring in as well. Stephen Baumgartner says, good morning, guys. Russ is my quarterback. Russ is a Denver Broncos quarterback, that's for sure. At least one more year. Stephen, we've talked about it a lot, that, the structure of the contract, for whatever you think of the extension, whose idea it was, et cetera, et cetera. I advocated at the beginning to wait. You had 2 years, relatively affordable numbers. Wait a year for both your sakes, Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. Wait a year, or there's no rush. At least play a game, do something before you rush into this. Live together for a year before you get married. Make sure it's the right fit, because this should be the last contract of Russell Wilson signs that you're hoping. And you're hitching your wagon to Russell Wilson. You can get out of this after next year without crippling your team too badly. We've seen worse. We've seen worse cap hits from what you would see. That is one of the things that the new coach from the Denver Broncos, I'm positive he's being assured. He's asking those questions: contract, cap, quarterback. What are you willing to do? And if I'm George Payton sitting in there, I'm looking at my cap numbers in my spreadsheet and say, I got Cortland Sutton that we can move on from. I've got Tim Patrick we can move on. Basically, you can hit the reset button on this team after the 2023 season and rebuild. If I'm a head coach coming in, why would you want to be in that dumpster fire of the Denver Broncos? Well, if I've got ownership I believe in and all the resources in the world, and I can start fresh in 2023 while making $20 million a year, it doesn't sound too bad. Again, these are long-term projects. This isn't, I'm coming in and as a mercenary player trying to get one last ring before I quit. The next coach coming in is going to want to be there 10 years. Okay. He's going to outlast, the next coach should outlast Russell Wilson's contract. He should. Michael Ranquillo coming in. He says, good morning, Nick and Scott on Broncos country. Go Broncos. Good morning, Michael. Appreciate all the support you have been showing us on Facebook through the years, obviously, and then really ramping it up again over the holiday period as we roll into January here. Lawrence hurt his back shoveling snow. You got to be careful out there. I wear a Fitbit. I've had one for, 6 or 7 years now. And the first time I broke 4,000 calories burned in a day was shoveling snow. And if you're not in any kind of condition, you can have some, it's rough as you found out. So I hope you're feeling better. Steven likes to come and he also said, Russ is my quarterback and Sean Payton is my choice for coach. Last week we were asked, who's your 1A, 1B, et cetera, et cetera. I've shuffled mine around a little bit, but from the very beginning, I said Sean Payton was my 1A, assuming that you're not having to pay a crippling price to get him. And if you have to pay a crippling price to get him, you probably aren't going to get him because he's not going to want to come. For me, it's a little bit like the quarterback situation. If I don't have a ready-made roster and I'm rebuilding, do I want to give away 3 first-round picks for a quarterback? And then he comes in and he gets the hell beat out of him for a couple of years, and then he's broke. That wasn't the case when you did that with Russell Wilson. You thought that you were a quarterback away, and you might have been. There was so much to go wrong from coaching, injuries, et cetera, new systems, adjusting, all of that type of stuff, that it all went as bad as you could have worse than you could have possibly thought, for sure. Dave Glassman coming in with the hearts. Appreciate you, Dave. Bouncing in and showing us support on YouTube after being a stalwart on Facebook for so long. 1 second, y'all. Let me grab a slug of coffee. Lion Coffee from Patrick Wiltie. He's in Hawaii. Check him out. LionCoffee.com. Keeps us well caffeinated, which, half the reason I'm here today is because of Patrick and keeping me caffeinated with the coffee. Jeremy Sean says, I seriously doubt Sean Payton goes to Carolina since they are in division. Texans are a mess organizationally. I think it's us or he sticks with TV. Carolina, now, when the interview that he had, and you can find it on Twitter, it's not too hard to find, that he did with Coward, Sean Payton was fairly forthcoming. Maybe that's because he's not coaching anybody right now. Like I've always said, coaches lie so much that they call it coach speak. They don't even call it lying. But he basically said the compensation to the Saints would likely change depending on who the team was. Okay. If it's in division, it's going to cost more. It's going to cost more for the Saints. Now the Panthers could come up and give a package that says that the Saints can't refuse, but then you've got to compete against that. Think of that the reverse way. Do I want to send a bunch of draft picks to a team I'm going to have to play twice a year? So it does. It goes both directions on that. Arizona doesn't seem like the best fit right now. New general manager. And I think the reports were that there was no discussion, and if Payton was looking at that job, kind of would have liked to have had some input on who he's going to be working with and for, et cetera, et cetera. Could go back to television. If the Saints try and strong arm him or take 2 pounds of flesh from the Denver Broncos in a trade, the Broncos could say no. Payton could say, okay, well, I'll sit out 1 more year, and now I'm just 1 year away from being able to go for nothing. So if you're the New Orleans Saints, do you take what the bird in hand and say, okay, I got a first-round pick and maybe a fourth and $10 million? Or do I risk getting nothing out of that? That's going to be a good question, but it seems like for the most part, the compensation has been at least agreed upon in principle before you start talking. I'm not going to go through several rounds of interviews with Sean Payton if I don't have at least some idea of what his value is going to be to the New Orleans Saints, what it's going to take me. I see these. Y'all know I'm a big soccer fan. Chelsea, go blue. This is exactly how every transfer, every player movement works in this. So I'm very familiar with this. You get a contract. You basically have to buy the contract up from that team. And you come to personal deals. You say, okay, he's going to be worth about $50 million, this player. Okay, I'm going to talk to the player. We're going to come to personal terms, meaning he's going to get a new contract when he comes to my team. We've agreed. Now I'm going to go back. It's 50. Wait, it's 60 now? All right, I can do 60. I'm going to send you. Wait, it's 65 now? Well, to hell with you, and the deal falls apart. Or it comes down less, and the player threatens to sit out, and all these kind of things, and the value comes down. This is exactly how every transfer works in soccer. It's actually kind of fun. Alex Barrios coming in. Appreciate you coming in, Alex. Says, any word on Javonte Williams' recovery? I haven't heard, Alex. He's been doing some events and stuff. I've just heard reference of, it's been good to see him working, but nothing definitive at this point. Hoping to see him back and doing well. He is a big part of this team. And, I would like to see Latavius Murray come back. I would. He was on a vet minimum deal. You got him off of the practice squad. You're throw $1.5 million at him for next year. That's considerably less than you were paying Melvin Gordon. The last, you've been paying him the last 3 years, but Melvin was on about $3 million last year. You're getting him half price of Melvin Gordon. And I'd probably want to draft a running back too in the later rounds. You can find value at the running back position, 5th, 6th, 7th, who can come in and help your team. And I've got a veteran, insurance, steady Latavius Murray, while Javonte Williams comes up to speed. So hopefully we see Javonte Williams at his best again soon. Richard Miles coming in. Says, good to see you, Scott. Any good news about our coach? Nothing definitive yet. Just that the talk is they want to do a second round of interviews with some guys next week. Sean Payton will probably be one of those guys. I think some of the news about some of your old coaches, Ed Donatel was fired yesterday. He was. I didn't know he was there. I talk about how incestual the coaching is. The coaching staffs are. It's worse than the mafia. Once you're in, you're in. You're a made man, and they just keep recycling these old guys over and over again. And it's like, well, he coached here and he coached there. He's been fired from every one of them. Now, Donatel will get another job, but again, these guys are so risk adverse. We'll go on about that later. Vic Fangio, the Atlanta Falcons put in a request for him for their open defensive coordinator position. I'm not sure Vic Fangio is what the Atlanta Falcons fans would want at this point. He's very bend but don't break. And if I say that to a Falcons fan, I'm going to have to duck because they're so tired of that. Brian Flores is also a finalist for the defensive coordinator job, and he is a very attack-minded coach. That's what Falcons fans want right now. It's like we're tired of being safe and stinking. If we're gonna stink, let's at least attack. Let's have some fun. 39 sacks in 2 years. 39. That would have ranked them 21st in the entire NFL this year. That's 39 sacks in 2 years. So no news yet. End of next week, I think something will happen. I think something will be done by this time next week. I wouldn't be surprised. Want to come in? I'm going to slide down the chat a little bit because hot pink is flashing before my eyes right here, and it's Ethan coming in, and he says, feels like Payton is ready to coach, and Saints don't get anything next year for him as his contract expires. Then so Payton will do Loomis a solid and vice versa. Now, I think Payton is leveraging the two richest owner against each other. That's business. Yeah, it is. There was some hard feelings with Harbaugh, I guess. He was using us, or he was just leveraging us to get a better position, and people are upset about that. To get a raise or Michigan or to do. Why would you be upset about it? That's part of the game. I promise you, it's not the first time that Greg Penner has had somebody leverage a Greg Penner name to get more money from a current employer. I used to use that as my recruiting pitch to make sure I got an interview with a candidate I wanted to fill one of my roles, like Chad Jensen. If I'm recruiting Chad Jensen over to my fledgling operation over at Sports Illustrated, and he's still with 24/7 where we worked together before, I said, Chad, at least let me get you a raise. Meet with me. Hear us out. Let me get you a raise at the very least. Okay. 2-hour Zoom call. Big deal. It's not like they rolled out the red carpet and pissed off every other candidate they've had. No big deal. Payton, leveraging the two guys against each other. Sure. And you may know where you want to go all along, and let's see if I can get a little bit more out of it without overplaying my hand. I don't think Sean Payton's going to make a ton of money. Let me see how I can put it that way. Sean Payton is going to come out of this. If he takes a job this year, he is going to be the highest paid coach in football. Flat out. He's going to be the highest paid coach in football. And yes, this is the year that the Saints, if they want to get something back for him, Saints have salary cap trouble. How do you alleviate some of that? Draft picks. Get a draft picks. If you can get out of this, if you are the Denver Broncos and you can get out of this with the first round pick you have this year, which could be in the 30s, likely in the 30s, and change something down the line, that's okay for me. And we can talk more about that as well as I work my way down the chat here. Darius Simmons coming in and says, good morning, Scott. Good morning, Darius. He says, do you think the Saints will be greedy and ask for 2 first-round picks? I keep seeing I don't want to give this up too. Do you think? Yes. I think they'll ask for 2. I'd ask for 4. I'd ask for everything you got. People react to, what they see. I'm going to float this out there. I'm going to leak this to the media. We're looking for 2 first-round picks and $25 million. And people lose their minds. Do you remember last year when Teddy Bridgewater's agent said, yeah, he's looking for, a $20 million a year deal when he was starting and playing fairly well for the Broncos, relatively speaking, and people are losing their minds. Guys, that's just talk. It's just talk. It's just PR. It doesn't mean that's what you're going to get. Doesn't mean that's what they would settle for. It means, what do I want? Want doesn't get. That one of my favorite lines from was that one? The Dark Knight Rises. Wants but doesn't get. Yeah, you can want 2 first-round picks. What will they settle for? That's the question. What will the Saints settle for? First-round pick and change and a bunch of cash? Okay. Cash is easy in the Denver Broncos ownership group. Draft picks are a little tougher to give up, but a 30, again, 6 months of where were we at the trade deadline? It was October 31st because it was in London. That was the last game that Bradley Chubb played. Was that 6 games in, 8 games in? 9 games of Bradley Chubb to trade for Sean Payton. I mean, start really thinking about it and you realize how silly it sounds. What some people think these draft picks are worth. 9 games of Bradley Chubb or Sean Payton. That's a pretty good trade, I think. Let me see here. I want to go down. I think Jeremy says that Fangio just interviewed for DC and Atlanta, so that tells me that they aren't tied. Someone else must have asked, and I apologize if I missed it, that Sean Payton had said, here we go. It was Lou 101 here. He says, is the prospect of bringing Vic Fangio as his DC likely to block on Sean Payton becoming head coach if it means losing Evero? I said this from the get-go, Lou. There is a really good chance that Sean Payton can get a 9-figure contract. Really good chance. 5 years, $20 million each. That's 5 years, $100 million. Count the zeros. That's a 9-figure contract. Do you think Sean Payton's going to turn that down over Vic Fangio? Ask yourself that. No way. No way. Let me say it one more time. No way. All that stuff, people, again, you hear these things, these reports, these rumors, we take them as fact. They're not fact. Nothing is fact until it actually happens. So don't worry too much about it. Fangio is actually up for a couple of head coaching jobs himself. Fangio is looking at defensive coordinator jobs in different places. Has Sean Payton reached out to Vic Fangio about possibly being his defensive coordinator if he takes another job? Sure. Why not? I'm putting in phone calls and seeing if you'd be interested, building my staff. This guy coached for 15 years. He's probably got 100 coaches that have coached for him between assistants, passing game coordinators, et cetera, et cetera. He's got a Rolodex, and he can put his choice together of who he wants. Why don't you come over here and make double as a defensive coordinator for me? Sure. But that's not a blocking point for anybody. Sean Payton isn't turning down the Denver Broncos and $100 million because of Vic freaking Fangio. I promise you that. Let me scroll down here a little bit last night. Let me see. Bama X coming around here says, so I heard a slight rumor last night regarding Chicago and their number 1 overall pick. The rumor suggests that the Bears take a quarterback and trade Fields away, basically pulling in Arizona. That's possible. And if you're the Bears, you want to up the value of that pick as much as possible. So I want to say the general manager didn't say no, but him saying we would have to be blown away is as close to a no as you're ever going to get in general manager speak. They're happy with Justin Fields. But I'm not taking that off the table because it enhances my value of trying to get extra from the Colts, who could miss out on a quarterback altogether if they stay at 4. Remember, this draft could be very similar to the 2021 draft, where the team in the catbird seat, the number 1 pick was Trevor Lawrence. They weren't going anywhere. Trevor Lawrence was that guy. They needed a quarterback. Number 2 was the Jets. They needed a quarterback. They weren't going anywhere either. So who was open for business was number 3, was the Miami Dolphins. And they got a ransom from the San Francisco 49ers in the form of 3 first-round picks for the rights to Trey Lance. And who's sitting there going, damn it? The Atlanta Falcons, who did get a good pick in Kyle Pitts. It was a great draft. But Kyle Pitts, 3 first-round picks for a team that's in, the state that the Atlanta Falcons were in. Yeah, 3 first-round picks. That one's easy. So they will trade out of that spot. I'm almost positive. And they're not taking a quarterback. If they do, it'll be to trade them later. When did that happen? Y'all remember when the Chargers took Eli Manning, flipped him for Phillip Rivers for that spot, and it was basically a 1-4? That could happen. Let me see. Derek Kincaid. Here we go. We said we weren't going to focus on the negatives, Derek, but Derek comes in. He says, what are the setbacks to having Payton as a head coach? Downside to his hiring. Some people will point to character a little bit. The guy is a jerk. Don't get me wrong. The Saints are the Falcons' biggest rivals. I grew up an Atlanta Falcons fan. The Saints beat the hell out. They beat the Falcons pretty regularly with Sean Payton, and he's smug. He is. When he's your smug coach, who cares? That's not one of those things. There are people, Derek, that will point out, well, he only won 1 Super Bowl with a Hall of Fame quarterback. Like, it's easy to win a Super Bowl with a Hall of Fame quarterback. He was also in an NFC South that had an MVP caliber in Carolina Panthers. The fluctuation with the NFC South while they were there was crazy. You were going against prime Matt Ryan. Now, you can say what you want about Matt Ryan, but Matt Ryan is sitting 6th all-time in passing yards and is by far the winningest quarterback in Atlanta. It was a golden age, really, for both the Saints and the Falcons while they were there. Tampa Bay wins a Super Bowl while he's there. The NFC South was a dog fight year in and year out for those years. All 4 teams made the Super Bowl while Sean Payton was coach there. And I think they did it. If they didn't do it multiple times, all of them were knocking on the door of NFC championships, winning the division. It was a cycle over and over and over again. It was a tough division. People will point to that. People will point to the defense was sometimes not what you want it to be. Okay, well, you've got a culture of defense in Denver. That's not going to go away overnight. So I'm okay with that one too. And the big one, Derek, is the draft picks. What would it cost you, because he is not a free agent, to trade for him? That's the big one. And that's the one that people are having problems with the most, because that's not a usual way of doing business. They see as, well, I could get this guy who's just as good and not have to give up draft picks. But is he? Is he just as good? It's almost like the draft pick himself. Nick likes to talk about, I think, the Family Guy. It's like, let's see. You've got your first round pick. You've got a spectacular coach, proven head coach, turned around one of the, if not the worst franchise in the NFL into being a perennial winner. Or you could have the magic box. And in this box, you might actually get a coach that could help you win. I'll take the magic box. It could be a coach. Again, put it this way. How did you get that first round pick? I'm going to repeat this for what I said just a few minutes ago. How did you get that first round pick? You traded Bradley Chubb, who had 9 games left on his contract, for a first round pick. You traded 9 games of Bradley Chubb for Sean Payton. Would you make that trade? Come on. It sounds kind of stupid when you put it that way, doesn't it? Yes, of course you would make that trade. Nick Kendall has just texted me, so let's see where he is. I think he may have set his alarm incorrectly. He may be joining us shortly. We'll see. If he does, we'll say welcome in. But the big one, Derek, is what will the Saints ask and what would it be worth? There's some people that say, I'm not giving up a draft pick for a coach. Broncos country and Broncos family, you have seen the last 7 years of Denver Broncos. Wouldn't you want a proven winner? One of the hottest coaching candidates, a really good offensive-minded coach, one of the best. And again, with Drew Brees, this and this, he was 17-5 with Taysom Hill, Teddy Bridgewater, and Jameis Winston as his starting quarterbacks. The man can coach football. Let me see here. Alan Forster, that feels like a newer name. He says, good morning, Scott. I watched the Dolphins and Bills and realized I'd forgotten how offense can be played. You know what? If you watch the Ravens and Bengals, you are getting flashbacks. It's like the Ravens make everything seem so hard. They make it seem so difficult to move the ball and to get into the end zone. I'm like, God, I feel like I'm watching the Broncos. And then you watch all these other teams and they're putting up 30 each. So it would be, it's definitely very different in here. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. I want to get to the Epic Gamer who comes in. He says, good morning. That's it. Just showing support for the show. Thank you, sir. I certainly appreciate that. Let me see here. There was plenty other things in here as well. There's so much going on. Apologize if I have to look through the chat to find one. Dom comes in. It's a good question. He says, question, Scott, if we get Sean Payton, is the organization in for a rebuild or a reset? Or the third one here, Dom, is can you start winning again? Maybe rebuild or reset's the same thing. To me, that's the interesting question for 2023, Dom. And that will be your litmus test. If you come in and Sean Payton can't turn this thing around right away, and you see regressions big time from Russell Wilson, you're hitting the reset button after 2023. You're moving on from 2023. You're eating the dead cap hit, and you're probably in a good place where you could trade up. Nobody's trading up and giving up Caleb Williams or Drake May. So maybe you're in a position where you could still draft those guys if you had that bad a season. I don't see that happening. This team would be better immediately next year. And you were close in a lot of games. How many one-score games were you in? How many times were you just like Nathaniel Hacketing these games where you felt like you were missing these games because of Nathaniel Hackett? Competent coaching is the difference between winning and losing. So as we've said before, and I recognize this guy, and I'll finish my thought and say hello.
Hello.
I said before on this, I can't finish my thought. Nick, how are you? Welcome in.
I'm good. I'm good. I guess I had an alarm that was set for 5:40 a.m., but only set for Mondays and Wednesdays. So when I turned it on, it didn't go off. So I woke up. I'm like, man, it's a little bit lighter than it should be. Oh my God, it's 7:10. So here I am. Good morning, everybody. And sorry that I was late. I sent you a screenshot of it as proof. I need to delete that alarm. I think I had it set for obviously since we're earlier on Mondays and Wednesdays, but didn't even think about it. And Nick still has bedhead. Well, I got the hat on.
You do have a cat, right?
Yeah, I do have a cat.
See, I've got cats that are ravenous now.
Yeah.
Like I've never had usually I'd put down, I could leave the cats I've had before. I could leave them for 3 days.
Yeah.
I'd dump a bunch of food in the bowl and be gone.
Yeah.
The cat I have now, they grew up, we got them from a shelter, from the Humane Society. And I guess they had to fight for their food when they were kittens.
Mm-hmm.
But 6 o'clock, I don't need an alarm. If I'm sleeping, one of them's coming to get me. Hey, you food guy in the bowl now. So there is no sleeping in. I don't use alarms.
We have a cat named Queso, and we've trained him that when we first wake up, it's not time to eat. We typically wait about an hour, so he doesn't do that the first sign of movement. Now, once it gets start to be like 9 o'clock, he'll start to get a little bit irritating. But yeah, we could say he starts menacing. But yeah, welcome in everybody. And I do have that awake. Yeah, and all I need is to wake up is that kick of adrenaline and be like, holy bleep, it's time to go. So thank you for kicking it. I called him like, man, I hope he's going. But we are. And let's say hello to everybody. We got Grant coming in. If we don't land Sean Payton, would it be better to run it back with Rosberg in 2023 and bank on the next hiring cycle to get the guy? Not better. Not a thing. I don't think they do that. I like the idea, Grant. I think this is one thing that the Broncos were considering when I kept hearing the second half of the season where we'd really like to bring Nathaniel Hackett back still. I think they were concerned that they were not going to be in a good enough position to get the big swing. I think they didn't want to do it their first true offseason on the job. And also the whole Russell Wilson situation with how he was playing made the job look worse than it probably looks a little bit now. So running it back to Rosberg, probably not going to happen.
If you want to do this, doing it with Jerry Caldwell, Jesus. You show up and I start losing my mind. Jim Caldwell might make more sense. Do so, at least do it with someone with some experience. Dom Capers, let's bring him down. But Rosberg, I don't know. To me, do you accept that as Broncos country? I mean, do you accept the fact that we were going out and swinging big? And that was a question we had, the other night. It's like, how do you explain to the fan base when you're going to go out and swing big and you're going to bring in Dan Quinn? I said, well, we did. We did swing big and we missed. They'd never say that. But they did interview Sean Payton and they didn't get him. They did interview Jim Harbaugh and they didn't get him. They did swing big. Now they might miss. Now, do you just bring back, again, if you're going to fire, we talked about this. Oh, they look better. Justin Alton looked better. Everybody started getting real excited about the guys that are there. It's like, we're going to go through this whole season and we're going to keep everybody but Nathaniel Hackett? No,
not happening.
It's not going to be like that. And I know you ran up Butch Berry too. But no, I don't think Rosberg is a legitimate candidate. I'd rather elevate Ejiro Evero, for something like that and let him get head coaching experience for something like that. Epic Gamer's very happy. The missing piece is now here. Yeah, it's just not the same. It's just not the same without you. It's
hard to do a show by yourself. It's just like keeping it going the whole time. I apologize. I'm gonna have to tweet out that picture of the alarm because Monday and Friday, Wednesday. What am I doing?
We believe you. Yeah, we believe you. It's okay.
I know.
The first time you did it, I was a little worried. I called and texted. I'm like, dude, are you okay? But now it's like, hey, once a quarter, if you oversleep, I'm okay with that, considering you start at 6 a.m. for goodness sakes. David Cromwell comes in. He looks like David Shaw will be a finalist per Mike Kliss. DQ, still no slam dunk to be hired. It's funny. I like Dan Quinn. I think he would be a good hire, but I don't want Dan Quinn simply because no one here wants him. There isn't anybody in this entire chat in Broncos country that is saying, oh yeah, we'd really be excited about Dan Quinn. It's a bad situation for him. I want him to be, he's an emotional coach and he's a great person. I mean, a great person, hell of a football coach. I don't want him to come into an environment where people are already against him like that. And there isn't anybody that is advocating for Dan Quinn right now. I would much rather see, be excited about a first timer. And I think I told this to you. I was like, next on my list, Sean Payton. Now it was Sean Payton, then Harbaugh. Next on my list is probably DeMeco Ryans.
I do really like DeMeco Ryans. If you guys haven't had a chance yet to listen to or read the piece that Benjamin Solak wrote on The Ringer, then take a chance to do that before the game on Sunday, where the San Francisco plays Dallas. Excellent piece on DeMeco Ryans. David Shaw, I mean, does sound like he's going to be in there. Will be really interesting to see what happens. And I've definitely been hard on Dan Quinn. It's mainly, again, it's because the fact that he keeps being elevated as an equivalent to Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton, which just pisses me off.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm being lied to.
How I like revisionist history.
Yeah.
No. I mean, it's just, no, Dan Quinn. And the one that gets me is Dan Quinn was a failure in Atlanta. No, he wasn't. He didn't take over the Patriots. He took over the Falcons. And the Falcons were coming off their best 5-run stretch in their history, no doubt. But they were still the Falcons. Don't get me wrong here. He did not fail in Atlanta overall. That bothers me. But he's not Sean Payton. Sean Payton did it with the Saints for 15 years. That's that's very, very different. He's not Sean Payton.
Yeah. He'd be a quality coach.
And he doesn't have the track record at different places the way Jim Harbaugh did.
Yeah.
If the players hadn't advocated to bring Quinn back for that last year where they started 1-6 again, his record wouldn't look that bad. It'd look more like, oh, one bad season, then they got rid of him. But again, after he didn't fire Sarkisian, I was done with Dan Quinn. Loyalty he's almost loyal to a fault. And I would think that's one of the things he would learn was, man, I got to cut bait when I have to.
That's the business. It's definitely tough. But
Appreciate you, David.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, David. And David Shaw. So obviously referencing the Mike Kliss piece yesterday, a lot of Mike Kliss talk. He released an article yesterday talking about, again, the big three swings, being the last one being Dan Quinn. But then he mentioned that George Payton's going to have a lot of power removed, I guess, in this cycle, which is pretty wild, where the Broncos are, even this last interview, not going to have Payton as a part of the interview process. He's still going to be an advisor, but he's not going to be in the heads that are going to be the deciding. It's going to be Rob Walton, Condoleezza Rice, the grandpa Walton, the oldest one, and his wife. I should pull it up while I look up who Kliss was talking about here. But George Payton, not a part of it, which makes you wonder how much he's going to be. Nick, grab some hair of the dog. Just kidding. Thanks to a Facebook user. I don't know who that is. But yeah, I don't have any coffee either. Who needs it? But what do you think about that? George Payton out of the loop here, according to Mike Kliss, with this second interview.
Doesn't totally surprise me. Again, if I'm going down an org chart, it's going to go Greg Penner, and then the head coach and the general manager are going to be side by side.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have subordinates? I mean, do you have equals interviews? Sometimes, yeah, because you want to know what the culture fit's going to be like. You want to know how people are going to work together. So sometimes you do have them come in and do interviews and meet. Like, hey, this is who you're going to be working with. What do you think? But no, we've discussed this a lot. And depending on who you go in, again, the question was last week, and I keep repeating it because it keeps coming up in my head, is George Payton's fate tied to this next head coaching hire? Yes, in several ways. It could be as soon as the guy's hired, George Payton's out. That could be how it's tied to him. And it would definitely be he cannot survive another head coaching failure. Cannot. So either way, best case for him, and if he wants, and he may just, if he's stripped of power, he may just see out his contract and then resign. As if he's still there.
Yeah, certainly possible. And it does sound like George Payton will be back next season also in this article. But, I mean, what's his role? There's been some talk of he's been kind of limited in terms of the contracts he can be working with after the bye week. The Broncos put a halt on Draymond Jones, Dalton Reisner, even the discussion there. That's rumored, but out the window. The head coaching search is not a part of it. I mean, is he just here to do the draft? I mean, is he okay with this? I mean, it really seems like what he was sold when he brought in with Elway is so different now.
Think about this from a holistic view. I mean, from the 30,000-foot view, I just spent $5 billion on a company, and it's an appreciating asset. I'm not worried about losing my money, but I come in and things are going wrong. Who's in charge? George Payton's the number one decision maker in there. Okay. Things are going horribly wrong and you're in charge. Let's put a hold on this until I figure out what the hell's going on. Until I get an idea of what's going on within this company, you're not doing any more drastic in any type of big moves like this. You'll still cover the day-to-day, but we're not acquiring this company. We're not firing this guy. We're not doing any of those things just yet. We're not giving giant promotions out because until I figure out what's going on, you could be the next one out the door.
Yeah. Do you think after hearing all this stuff, is there a chance that now he's safe for now and he's not going to have to, answer to the head coach, according to the article, but do you feel there's more of a chance that he's gone before the draft? Less of a chance? Is he here? I also have heard from, there's the Athletic podcast. They have one that is two former general managers who talk about it. And they talked about it like it was a fact that George Payton's resume has hit multiple desks across the NFL.
That is a figure of speech, I'm sure. The guy's not emailing out resumes at this level.
Yeah.
But do I think, do I think George Payton will be? No. No. I think it would be an uncomfortable. You talk about atmosphere. You talk about bringing somebody in. If it's Sean Payton, I think the answer is no. I think there would be too much of a dynamics of who's in charge, who's this, who's making the calls, bad feelings, so to speak. Just it'd be uncomfortable. I think it's drama you don't need within the organization. If Sean Payton is your head coach, I do not think George Payton is the general manager August 1st.
Yeah. Certainly possible. It's going to be interesting to really follow this, man. All these dynamics, Broncos country, maybe not good, but never boring. Quentin Caldwell, good morning to you, Quentin. We appreciate you coming in. Always love I can't tell if this is a picture of you here or not, but the hair is magnificent. I really enjoy seeing it every time you come in and say hello. Deanna Hendry also. I see
Can't
Deanna.
see to your scalp like you can. You can tell when the sun comes out. Now I can. Ow. That's hot.
I'm lucky to still have thick hair, but holding on for dear life. Deanna Hendry, $20, saying, good morning, Scott and Nick. Sure hope we get Sean Payton, MHH for life. Thank you so much for coming in, Deanna, out there in Alaska. I saw you also on Twitter earlier today. So as I woke up, checking the time, messaging Scott, like, should I message on here? And I'll check what's going on. But good morning to you. Hope you're doing well. And it's even earlier out there for you than it is for me. So no excuses. Don't give me excuses. Quentin Caldwell coming in. Yeah, it's my hair.
Love it.
What an amazing mop. God,
love it. Michael Ranquillo coming in says Sean Payton hasn't visited the Broncos facility yet. He should get a second interview to visit. Yeah, when he comes in, you went to him first. Again, we talk about Harbaugh, and did he use these? And there's hard feelings in this. You weren't on here when I was talking about that, Nick. I was like, come on, that's what you do. In fact, that's part of my recruiting pitch when I'm trying to get somebody is let me get you a raise. By talking to me, you can get a bump from your current employer. That's fine. I promise you, business folks know that. And a 2-hour Zoom call, who cares? A 2-hour Zoom call could have been worth $20 million to Jim Harbaugh. No big deal. Now, you fly out to go visit with Sean Payton. You bring him into your facility. You're a little more serious about this. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. But, this is the next step. You worked on his schedule. You're busy people too. And the next step, bring them in. And then I think they would probably start laying out some of the plans too. Right now, what you see now isn't what you're going to see in 5 years. Be part of this growth. This is what we're going to do here, where, we're going to upgrade these facilities and add this, practice this, sports science, that, and really pitch the vision of what Denver Broncos will become over the course of the next decade.
Yeah, will be really interesting. And I got a good point here from Dr. Van Nostrand coming in here saying he has slight concerns. Talking about all the people that'll be doing the interview. They have all the money in the world. Yes, they owe the team. But what do they really know about football? Now that no football people really in this last second of the interview, what are we asking and what are we comprehending? I mean, like, is that a concern for you? I didn't even I guess my brain is starting to catch up here, but that does sound weird when you put it out like that.
We've narrowed this down to the football people we feel comfortable with. Now, who do we feel comfortable with sending $100 million? That's what it could be. We don't have to convince me on scheme at this point. You wouldn't be here if you weren't a qualified candidate. Now I'm about to invest a ton of money into you. Convince this group that you're the right guy.
Yeah, so the bit says here, for Penner and his associates will pause to consider to bring in for a second interview next week. Second round of interviews will involve Penner, his wife and co-owner Carrie Penner, and Broncos controlling owner Rob Walton. And George Payton will be around for follow-up discussions and help coaching finalists tour the Broncos facility. So he's not there to do the interview process, and he wasn't at the beginning. I guess also not Condoleezza Rice this time around, but the preliminary ones, I guess I like that you have multiple people in there, multiple eyeballs now with the second process. And these are the people who have the money bags that are going to be making this final interview. So I guess they get to make the rules such as life. But interesting all the same. Taylor Ryan Evans saying, do you think if the Broncos got DeMeco Ryans, he'd bring someone under Kyle Shanahan's tree for offensive coordinator? I would assume so. I think that's a pretty safe bet. Not only DeMeco Ryans working under Kyle Shanahan, but I also think he was playing under Gary Kubiak in Houston for a good amount of time. So he probably knows some of the offensive coaches on that side of the ball as well. Probably one of the reasons he's now with Kyle Shanahan, because he was a player when Kyle Shanahan was under Gary Kubiak out there in Houston. So definitely a possibility. Some names that stick out to me. Former head coach Anthony Lynn. I know he's been up and down in his career. Former head coach of the Chargers, was an offensive coordinator for the Lions, I think, for a bit there. Maybe fired even under before Ben Johnson. But he's the running backs coach out there now. You got Brian Greasy is the quarterback coach, and a few other names as well. So I would assume that he's going to bring somebody in from that tree. Maybe even LaFleur, who was just fired from the Jets. I'm not sure if they overlapped that much, because I think DeMeco's only been a part of the 49ers for 4 or 5 years. He's ascended that quickly. But I think it's a safe bet.
Yeah, I'd say yes. Short answer, yes on this. You bring with you the guys you know, and it helps when you're coming from a good organization like that, and it's like, who's the next Mike McDaniels here? That's what I'm looking for. Who's the one that's not the offensive coordinator, but is the brains of the bunch? And that's who you bring with you, that you've come up with over the last 5 years. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. The other part of this, so I've mentioned this before, is there a head coach that you can work with that doesn't necessarily have the ego, that has an offensive background? You get a Frank Reich. Let's say he strikes out on all of his head coaching jobs. Jim Caldwell was an offensive guy, defensive guy, but somebody like that along those lines. What I advocated for Nathaniel Hackett to begin with. Why are you not going out there and doing an Arthur Smith in Atlanta and bringing in Dean Pease for your defense? Somebody who's been around the league for 4 years now. I know you got Dom Capers in the background. That's not the same. You went eventually and tried to fix that with Jerry Rosberg. But why wasn't Jerry Rosberg the special teams coordinator to begin with? Why didn't I bring in some experience on this? So if it's not one of the guys like that, one of those offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators, I believe, will be someone he's very familiar with that's younger. And the other one should be somebody who's got 20 plus years in the league.
Yeah. Agree 100%. We got Naj coming in 1999 saying, "Hey bros, sounds like Quinn is the top choice if Sean Payton falls through." I know you guys don't add Sean this, but because of the audio format and we have so many Paytons we have to deal with in Broncos country, I typically add the first name. So top choice if Sean Payton falls through. Is that your take? I know the offensive line is bad, but I'm really worried about edge. After Chubb, the D wasn't the same. What do you see the team doing at edge? So 2 for 1 here, 1999, you can get a 2 for 1. It sounds like, again, reading Kliss's piece here, that Dan Quinn is very much a guy to consider here, but so is David Shaw. David Shaw was talked about a lot. He's emerged as a candidate because he really impressed in his interview. And now that it's going to be Walton, Penner, Walton with this final interview, or Walton, whatever, the big one, I think the Stanford connection may come through here pretty big. And David Shaw is an impressive individual as well. Extremely intelligent, extremely well-spoken. Went to Stanford, coached Stanford a while. I know they fell down after the Pac-12 dynamic started to change, NIL, transfer portal, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty hard to compete at Stanford with the money that they lack in terms of football expenditures, which is fine at Stanford. But I think that I would put David Shaw. I think right now, if I was guessing, be Sean Payton number 1 for them. Then after that, I mean, flip a coin. Dan Quinn, David Shaw. I think David Shaw is really a chance for this.
It'd be interesting. Again, Stanford alum, Stanford connections. If this was 3 years ago, would you have been talking about it as being even a question? It's hard to sustain it at Stanford. And y'all have heard me say this before. The first time I heard this was Tommy Tuberville at Auburn. He says, you lose 10% of your support every year that you are there. He was head coach at Stanford for 11 to 12 for 12 years. 3 out of, went to the Rose Bowl 3 out of 4 times. Now, he just took over for what Jim Harbaugh had built. Okay, maybe. But he was also 10-3 6 years later, 9-5, 9-4, 8 years later. I don't know about you, but I grew up with Stanford as being a rollover, and then they became a power by going with that power football and going again. Skill players are born. It's hard to recruit those guys away from USC and Oregon. Not to mention that the Pac-12 has fallen off as a whole in the last 5 years, 5 to 10 years. But you can win in the trenches, and that's where Stanford was winning. I can get guys that are going to be there 4, 5, 6 years, and I can win in the trenches. And that's a good foundation. So I'd be okay with David Shaw. Surprise again. I said I'd be more comfortable with him as a head coach than an offensive coordinator because he's got a hell of a lot more experience and relevant recent experience as the head coach than he does as an offensive coordinator. Him coming in as OC for Jim Harbaugh didn't make any sense to me. It just didn't.
Yeah. It will be very interesting to see what happens with David Shaw. I've been a fan of him for a bit. Very good resume. Stanford did fall off at the end, but he's also only 50 years old still, which I think is crazy considering how long he was at Stanford. He started being the head coach at Stanford, I think, at 34, which is just unbelievable. But he's extremely successful there. We'll see what he brings. I mean, the college game is so different from the NFL game. The Pac-12 game is so different from the NFL game. It's a risky hire. Luckily, he wouldn't be doing the first-time jump. He was in the league for a number of years as well when he first graduated from Stanford. But will be very interesting to follow, and I think he's got a chance. The second part of Naj's question is after Chubb, the D wasn't the same. What do you guys see the team doing about edge? I think the Broncos have to look at edge hard, and the way the draft is set up right now, if the Broncos keep their first-round pick, the way the talent lines up, I think edge is just as likely, if not more likely, with their first pick than offensive tackle. I think right now there are 3 offensive linemen, offensive tackles that are worthy of a first-round pick, and I would be pretty damn shocked if any of them were available when the Broncos were picking. After that, it's day 2 talent. If you're taking, I think you're taking Anton Harrison, you're taking Darnell Wright. Those are guys who belong more at pick 50 than they do at pick 28 or whatever Denver will be picking. So there's options at edge. I think edge is up there.
Nick is a big fan of Jordan Reed, ESPN draft analyst, and he tweeted out recently that he thinks that edge is the deepest position in this draft, period. That's good news. The bad news is it's a very valuable position, and there could be a run on those guys early. Again, I think from my Falcons account, I retweeted that and said, I'll take 2, please. So the good news is the edges will be there. There's a lot of them. The bad news is if there's a lot of them, they're going to go quick.
Yep. I think that I was talking with Dane Brugler yesterday, and he talking about his mock draft, and he mentioned that he thinks that the second round there's going to be a massive run on edge rushers and wide receivers because a lot of these edges and wide receivers have something that keeps them from being a dynamic first-round prospect, but they also have traits that, like, okay, this is what I'm hanging my hat on. Round 2 pick all day. He thinks that he wouldn't be surprised if 1/3 of the selections round 2 are a wide receiver or edge.
Thank you so much for the support. But you know what that bodes well for, Nick? If everybody's taking wide receivers and edges, what aren't they taking?
Offensive linemen.
Offensive lineman. David comes in. We say we need to draft O-line first. Well, there you go. And again, I don't necessarily want to hear about this isn't great, this, or they're not there, that. The bar has been set so low at offensive line, you can get better. I don't care how bad people think this draft might be. I can invest in free agency in the offensive and free agency, coaching, and the draft, and I can drastically improve my offensive line in 2023.
Absolutely. And speaking of Broncos offensive line, do you know which of the Broncos play? Yeah, thank you so much, Naj. 1999 coming in big. Shout out also again, Deanna Hendry, 1920. Which Broncos current player on the offensive line played under David Shaw?
Stanford. May not have. It had to have been at Stanford. I don't know who was at Stanford.
Cam Fleming, all of his career out there at Stanford. I think he was recruited by Jim Harbaugh, but his very first season would have been David Caldwell's first season at Stanford. So it'll be interesting. I would be interested to hear what Cam Fleming has to say about David Shaw.
Again, I at $1.2 million, I would absolutely re-sign Cam Fleming without a doubt, 100%. And make him part of my. You carry 8 or 9. You usually carry 8 on a game day squad. He'd be one of my 8 guys, affordable. I'd offer him 2.5. Cam, I'm going to double your money. Yep. Do you want to come back? You might not be able to get him for that right now.
I think he's going to get about $3 million. I'd give him 6 over 2 years, just to have him in. And whoever you bring in at right tackle, you have to draft somebody. You're going to compete with him. I think maybe you go after somebody higher up first. Like, let's say Caleb McGarry does hit the market. Let's say you are interested in Mike McGlinchey, especially if you have any San Francisco ties. Then I'd be interested in using that money to go after those guys first. But after that, definitely Fleming, I think, is about as good of a consolation prize as you can get this cycle, because I think he's one of the better swings. And it's not just right tackle. We saw it at left tackle also. And when Billy Turner was before Billy Turner was back, but also when Garrett Bowles was still healthy, there was talk about moving Cam Fleming to left guard because of Dalton Reisner's struggle there in the run game, because they liked the movement skills of Cam Fleming enough and the power of him enough to put him at guard as well. So you're talking about a guy who could, in theory, play 4 spots on the offensive line. That's extremely valuable for your 6th, 7th offensive lineman.
Yeah, and talking about, free agency, Caleb McGarry comes in at 29th overall on PFF's list of pending free agents. Drop that in the chat real quick. There's several offensive tackles in there. How many of them actually hit free agency is another question. I know the Falcons would hope that Caleb McGarry doesn't enter, isn't free agent. They try and re-sign him quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But there are several offensive tackles in there. Do you want to start getting into the $15 to $20 million range for an offensive tackle right now for a right tackle? Probably not.
If you do, that means that you probably have moved on from Garrett Bowles, honestly, from the way
then
the
you're going to have to spend 10 to 20 on the other side.
Yep, 100%. So it'll be really interesting.
Because 10 of it already counts against your cap.
Yep.
So you're already 10. If you replace Bowles, you're already 10 against the cap. $8 million of savings to re-sign him, and you're breaking even.
Yep.
So the 10 that you say, the 10 on the dead cap, the 8 for the replacement costs, $18 million into your left tackle position. You better upgrade over Garrett Bowles if that's the case, because that's what Garrett Bowles costs you. You're breaking even if you get an $8 million offensive tackle. You better be an upgrade. And I don't know that you're going to upgrade over him on $8 million, Nick.
I don't think you are either, unless you get lucky in the draft and Anton Harrison, who's more of a project, hits and provides similar ability. I don't know. I agree with you that it's not going to be super difficult for the Broncos to improve on what they were this season. Also, assuming that the offensive scheme is better, and Russell Wilson doesn't have the hit the back of his drop and kind of stand there and then try to squeak out, get rid of the bleeping ball. But as far as improving the line, I think that we keep talking about the players. I think the offensive line coach is going to make a huge difference as well. Mm-hmm. We talked about it with going from Mike Munchak to Butch Berry. Every single person besides, I think, Cam Fleming was worse this year compared to the year prior. And that, to me, obviously, again, quarterback matters. Teddy Bridgewater got rid of the ball quickly. Russell Wilson, not as much, but the run blocking was so much worse. And you'd have to assume that they'd get better.
Yeah, I did mention coaching in there when I said a drastic improvement. Now, we're at 57 minutes before we get out of here. It's getting late since we started late. Before we get out of here, I did tease at the top the rookie rankings of production from ESPN, and I was a little surprised. You might not have the time to look that. I sent it to you. I put it I sent it to you to look at it. If you were to grade out of 32 teams, don't look yet. If you were to grade the 32 teams and their rookie classes, where do you think, and you can give me a range of 5, where do you think the Denver Broncos would have come in?
From production? Is this a per player, like an average, or is it the overall, like
it's an aggregate of the entire class?
Okay. I think the Broncos probably were 22 to 27.
Yeah, they were 20th.
Okay.
Which surprised me. And I didn't look too far below there, but some of the teams I follow really closely, the Atlanta Falcons were at 13. That shocked me. That one shocked me. They had a 1,000-yard rusher, the number 1 receiver on PFF, and a starting quarterback, and a really good edge player in their first 4, and a guy who had 70 tackles at inside linebacker, and you're 13th? Really? Okay, so I go down to 20, and I see the Broncos, but right underneath there's a Colts. I know the Colts pretty well, too. The Colts had a starting left tackle who graded really well. They had a 7th-round guy who started every game at safety. It was okay. And they had a top 6 wide receiver out of that bunch. Can you say the same thing about the Denver Broncos? Did you get that kind of production? The Broncos finished 1 spot ahead of the Colts. I'm like, I would have taken the Colts guys over the Broncos guys this year pretty easily. That one shocked me. That one surprised me, Nick.
Yeah, that is surprising. I'm not sure exactly what they were doing to get their value on that. I don't think the Broncos got a lot of value this season from Benito. Dulcich missed, a third of the season, and you traded away your last 3rd-round pick. Uwuzurike, you didn't get very much from the season. Damari Mathis was a good player.
Montrell Washington was a healthy scratch by the end of the year and was kind of a liability at the time. Damari Mathis was your top guy, but that's it, really?
Yeah. I don't think it was a And you don't want to
compared
fully
to
judge.
Alex Pierce, who was a top 5 wide receiver among rookies, a starting left tackle. I mean, I'll take the Colts. Again, I'll take the Colts here easily. Kevin G comes in. He says, should we draft a third quarterback to sit under Russ if we get Payton?
Third round.
I think you're going to draft a quarterback for maybe second. Is Rippin going to be back? And is he your third quarterback again? The whole Rippin thing, I don't really understand it. I didn't understand it. Is it next year yet? I didn't understand it last year when you elevated him to the 53 off the practice squad. Why? He was clearly your third guy, and you had no intention of playing him. He can fill in for a bad team and lose games, but he's not going to come in and win games for you. You know what is the Brett Rippin thing? No offense to him. I don't understand. So do you come in? Are there going to be 2 new quarterbacks that come in? Oh, I guess you got Guarantano. So is it Guarantano and who hasn't really played at all? He's a 3 to me. Where do you go to get your QB2 next year, Nick?
I think you probably have to look at the free agency market first to see if anybody would come in that's a solid backup, just because of the injuries Russ dealt with this last season, as well as how the contract set up. If Russell Wilson plays the same next year as he did for the majority of this past year, you might be considering benching him for the final 4 games of the season or something to make sure he doesn't get hurt.
We saw it happen twice to big money quarterbacks this year. We saw it happen to Matt Ryan in Indianapolis. We saw it happen to Derek Carr in Las Vegas, where those guys were benched and inactive the last month of their season so you could move on from their contracts.
Yep, and it's very possible for Russell Wilson as well if he plays poorly. Now, he did play better down the stretch. Broader sample size, not so great. So Jacoby Brissett stands out to me. Andy Dalton stands out to me. Maybe you talk about a Baker Mayfield or a Sam Darnold, those guys who busted from that 2018 class that are now fully in the market.
Brissett.
I would love Jacoby Brissett.
Did you say him? I'm sorry.
He was the first one I said.
Okay, well, good shout. Yeah. I was reading through the chat. Apologies.
Yep. No, Jacoby Brissett. So those are names that I would keep an eye on. Jacoby really stands out to me because of his beloved in locker rooms. I think he's becoming to not be a distraction in any way to the locker room and be there to be supportive and do the best he can. Where I don't know if I'd say the same about, Baker Mayfield or anything like that. And as far as Rippin coming in, Rippin was here because all the puns you can make with his names. Absolutely.
We got it. Thank you. I knew it had to be something, Andre.
My understanding with Brett Rippin is that he's essentially a coach.
It's all coming together now.
He makes a mean latte. He apparently is a great help in the meetings and in the practices. He helps guys, like younger players or the newer ones to the scheme, help get them in the right spot. Mm-hmm. He's essentially a player coach. I know a lot of teams sometimes like to keep
more of this dude.
That's essentially what his path is. That's what his path is.
And it's time. How long was Kellen Moore? I mean, was Kellen Moore maybe 3 years? Kellen Moore, let me see, maybe 3 years out of Boise State before the Cowboys made him a coach.
I think so.
That sounds about right. He was, it's hard to say because it was just 2015, and then he was practice squad. So the only time he ever played was 2015, but he was drafted. Let's see, draft pick. He wasn't drafted. So, but he's been as a coach for 4 years. Hard to tell here. But I thought he had more than 1 year. Here's your lightweight guy, 6 foot 197. That sounds familiar. There's your Bryce Young comp. So anyway, Alessandro comes in as talking about Taylor Heineke. I've seen his names brought up before too. When I was talking about some free agent quarterbacks, someone brought his name up as a competent mid-priced veteran that isn't necessarily going to be a starter. That's a good shout also.
Yeah. So we're at an hour. You're at an hour and 3 minutes. I'm probably at, I think, came in at like 27 minutes. But real quick.
All right. I want to hit this one out on here. Why don't you guys like Rippin? Because he's not good enough. Why do you guys defend Russ? We don't. But Russ has a contract that means he's not going anywhere. You're stuck with him next year. We've said over and over and over again. I can play it back for you 3 times that Nick has said, if he stinks like he stunk this year, you have to move on from him, and maybe you bench him at the end of the season. In fact, he just said that 45 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to bench him. Rippin's not going anywhere. He's got a contract that ensures that he's going to be a Denver Bronco next year.
Wilson
Rippin doesn't.
Yeah.
End of.
Yeah, 100%. And we also got Andre saying, love you guys. I usually watch, but not comment, mainly because Scott is always right and Nick is always wrong. Well, Scott and I agree a lot, but I'm used to this. This is how it is in my household as well. But no, that's okay.
That's why as you get older, you just stop talking. You wander around the house just talking to yourself. Nobody's listening anyway.
Smile and nod.
Yeah, and you complain about all the lights being on, those Progressive turning into your parents' commercial. That's the biggest one for me. Why are the lights on in this room? Who left the TV on?
Talking about we should park here because of the parking space. It's an easy out. But no, absolutely. Last question before we get on out of here. So the article from Kliss mentioned 1 to 3 guys being in the finalist here for that interview after the Broncos finish up. DeMeco Ryans today in San Francisco and Dan Quinn tomorrow in Dallas. Do you have any inkling or thoughts on who could be the 3 finalists, 1 to 3 finalists for this interview?
Oh God, I wanted to be DeMeco Ryans so bad, but if Kliss is out there being Dan Quinn's hype man, he's one of them, right?
Yeah.
Sean Payton, and then is it between David Shaw and DeMeco Ryans?
Jim Caldwell also probably at least deserves a mention here, but I think you nailed it. I think it's those 3.
If you're 3, Payton, Quinn, Shaw, and then maybe you're not getting the what do you call it when someone responds back, the good feelings back from DeMeco Ryans that you'd hope. So he's kind of left himself out of it. I know the Colts are very interested in bringing him in too, and he's got other things going on right now too.
Yeah. Jeremy says Kliss doesn't know anything yet. Yeah, I think things could drastically change.
Connection to Dan Quinn is what my question is. What again? Whenever I see somebody doing something, I always ask the same question: what's in it for them? It's cynical, but you'll get to the root of the. When you know that answer, you'll find out why people do a lot of things. Mm-hmm. What's 100%. In it for Mike Kliss to be hyping Dan Quinn? Is it honesty? No, it's not. Is it that's where he's getting signals from the inside? Let's start talking up Dan Quinn because that's who it's going to be? Maybe. Is it because Dan Quinn, he has a great connection, and if Dan Quinn comes in, he's going to be in like frickin' Flynn with the Denver Broncos and still maintain his number 1 spot as all things Denver Bronco news? Maybe.
That's somebody else.
Ask all those questions.
Yeah, no, that's definitely worth asking. And Jeremy made the point that I was going to make that we haven't even had the DeMeco Ryans interview yet. He could come in and kill it tomorrow and things could change. Mm-hmm. The fact that he listed these names beforehand. The Broncos have already interviewed Dan Quinn last cycle, so we'll see what happens here. We appreciate you guys coming in, hanging out with us. We'll see you again Monday morning. Make sure you're following Scott and I on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I am at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you're following us at BFB_pod and at Mile High Huddle. If you haven't done so yet, we got about 250, 300 people in here. Click the thumbs up on your way out. And if you're on Facebook while you're doing that, make sure you're joining our pages on Facebook at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. And as the ticker says underneath here, if you're joining us on YouTube or you have a YouTube, find us at Mile High Huddle, subscribe to the page or the show, like this exact show, and share it out on your social media. I know that we've been cutting up bits on TikTok. It's been on Instagram. I see some people retweet the show on Twitter. It's greatly appreciated. I mean, it really is. It helps so much. So you guys are great. It's a great show. I'm sorry about coming in a little late. I can't believe that. But thanks, Scott, for starting the show and holding it down. And I ran down, and here I am. So good morning.
Yeah, I told you I'm here because of y'all. That was one of the reasons that I'm here is because Patrick Wiltsey, lioncoffee.com, got me good and caffeinated. Ethan's texting me saying, hey, are we going to go? I'm like, well, yeah, we're going to go now. And then a big shout out to the community. This was a great conversation. I was about ready to, I don't want to say anything drastic, but I was having trouble following the chat last night. It was just so negative that it made me not want to be here. And I appreciate the conversation we have with nearly 300 people this morning. And a big shout out to our super chat superstars, Ethan coming in first, the Epic Gamer coming in a couple times, Grant Ledbetter, a newer name for me on the super chat. So thank you. David Cromwell, oldie but goodie, coming in. Quentin Caldwell, thank you so much. Deanna Hendry coming in early from Alaska. And of course, Naj. We love you, Naj. And Michael Ranquillo holding it down for us over on Facebook. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. We will see you again. Have a great weekend. Continue to choose kindness and compassion. Enjoy the games this weekend. Scott, real quick, games. We got to go over games. So the first game, I think we'll go Saturday's games. We got Jacksonville at Chiefs.
Chiefs. Jacksonville's a year away from competing. Jacksonville's a year away from being able to go into a place like Kansas City and pull off an upset. They're not there yet. They will not be able to slow down Patrick Mahomes in that offense enough. Speaking of, quarterbacks and Hall of Fame quarterbacks and one Super Bowl, Andy Reid's only got one Super Bowl in 22 years. What a failure.
Yeah. Ugh. God, what a loser. Jags, Chiefs. Chiefs are favored by 9 points. That's a pretty big spread. I think Jags are going to cover. I think it's going to be a good game still, but Chiefs win that one. Then the next game on Saturday, you got Giants at Eagles. Eagles are favored by 7.5. Yeah, I'm surprised the Chiefs-Jags spread is bigger than the Eagles.
Have you looked at stats? I mentioned the Falcons have 39 sacks in 2 years, which would put them in the bottom third if it was just this year with 29 sacks or with 39 sacks. Did you see the Eagles?
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The Eagles have 70 sacks. 70.
Pretty wild.
I'd get dizzy if I was rooting for the Eagles seeing all those sacks. My goodness. I went back and I didn't look at if that's a record or anything, but I went back about 8 years and no one else is even at 60. They had 70 sacks. Eagles win this one.
And then Sunday's games, much better matchups. You got both not 2-3s, but this one's a 2-3. Bengals at Bills. Bills favored by 5.5.
Oh man, Josh Allen's an enigma. To me, it's like he lacks focus. When he's dialed in, he's unbelievable. You like to call it God mode. I think the Bills overall are a better team than the Bengals. They're a more complete team than the Bengals. And we end up with the Bills and Chiefs in Atlanta for the AFC Championship game, played at Mercedes-Benz. If not sure everybody paid attention to that.
Yeah. So Bills are favored by 5.5. I think that the Bengals offensive line is too beat up. I'm too worried about their offensive line. They're missing right tackle, right guard, and now Jonah Williams is probably going to be out. I mean, that's not that the Bills defensive line is, the best ever. We remember them when they played the Broncos in the second preseason game. They just overwhelmed us, but kind of a harbinger of things to come. This is the breaks coming in. The breaks saying it's easy to get sacks and the offense is so far behind they have to throw in every down.
Everybody should do it then. Boy, that sounds so easy. 70 sacks.
Yeah.
That's a number that's really beyond comprehension for me. It ain't that easy, dude.
Yeah. They got depth. They got a lot of players that are extremely talented across the board. A lot of their guys are going to hit free agency, though, so they're going to have to turn over that unit. And then the game of the week, in my opinion, here, you got Cowboys at 49ers. The lowest spread of the week also, 49ers by 4.
I like the Cowboys in this one. The perennial chokers, overachievers. I think they're playing better, and their defense is better to shut down. You're going to need Brock Purdy to make plays on his own. I'm not sure if he's ready for that yet at this. So I like the Cowboys on this one. Dr. Van Nostrand, are you going to the game, Scott? Man, I only go to Broncos games. I go to Denver to go to Broncos games. I go to London to go to Broncos games. I'm not going to a game in Atlanta. That's boring. I feel stupid picking the Cowboys. I should know better, but I'm going to anyway.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to take the on those last two. I didn't get my picks. I'm going to take the Bengals over the Bills. I'm worried about the Bills' offensive line, but I think Joe Burrow's just got something going there. I don't even know what it is. He's a magician. And then I'm going to take the 49ers to be opposite of you in those two games. I agree with you in the first two, though. Those are the Saturday's games. A little bit more boring. Still, it's playoff football. It's great.
It might not be boring. That's the thing is
the matchups,
Jags will come in playing loose.
Yeah.
They don't have anything to lose at all. It'll be like they can come out playing like the second half against the Chargers. Nobody expects us to even be here. Go have some fun, boys.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Doug Peterson. I think he's a great football coach. I think they've got a good, solid core for a team. I don't think they've got the personnel yet to pull it off.
Yep. 100%. Well, what's boring is Andy Reid has one Super Bowl win. On that note, we're going to get out of here. Choose passion, compassion, and kindness. We love you guys. Have a good one. Go Broncos.